Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and happy Easter Monday for those of you who are watching us live. Anyway, real quick, I'm on day 16 of a juice cleanse. Go me, go me. I can't believe I've done it this long with working not only one job, but multiple jobs. So, woo, let's celebrate that for a second, right? I'm doing what I thought was impossible. And you know what? Today's guest is going to show us other ways that we can make impossible possible. So, without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Miss Molly Desch. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Julie.
So glad to have you here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. Ever since we spoke the first time, I'm like, yes, this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I would love to just start off with you sharing a bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Sure. Okay, so a little bit about me right now. I am a single mom of two boys. They're both teenagers, so my house is a little chaotic at times. Many years ago, I was a little, I guess, I didn't know how to handle hard emotions, and I had a hard time figuring out who I was. And so I resorted to drinking and using drugs. And that helped me cope with so many things. Divorce of my parents, trying to figure out who I am as a teenager, like in middle school and going into high school. I mean, just like all the things. And it just continued afterwards. And throughout my entire adulthood, I drank like every single day. And so a huge part of my wellness journey is sobriety. And I know that's why you invited me here today to talk about that. As a mom of two little boys, there's a lot of things that kind of work into my wellness journey, things that are under the hood, things that you don't really see, like, your weight or your skin or like the hair. So things that I've been taking care of is more at a soulful level. You look back when your kids are young and, you spent so much time drinking and, just trying to numb all the things, and you just missed out on a lot. So I missed out on a lot. I don't have like a ton of memories that I know some parents have. And so one day I just I had this very big download from the universe. She just kind of like smacked me upside the head, literally, via a conversation with my oldest son, and pulled me out of it. And I reached out for help, which was really terrifying. Admitting that you have a problem, admitting that you need help was so scary. So I called the person that I trust the most, my mother, and she flew in from out of town and stayed with me for a few weeks. And so I've been on this crazy sobriety journey ever since. It's been hard. I'm not going to say that as soon as you quit drinking, everything is all unicorns and rainbows, but you know what? I am able to deal with life so much better, and I'm loving life so much better. I love myself. My relationship with my kids is amazing. So I'm thankful that you invited me on the show so that I can talk a little bit more about my story, what led me here, and how I'm healing myself and what my wellness journey is all about.
Yeah, I'm all for sharing this because it's so not socially acceptable to be a drinker. I mean, it is in like the social sense, but when it becomes too much or it starts overtaking your life, it's a no-no, and nobody talks about it. So it's kind of like, why can't we just make this something that's okay to ask for help without it being so scary? I mean, I don't care who you are. If you feel shame, it's going to be hard. And anybody who drinks a lot feels shame. That's just how it goes hand in hand. But yeah, I'm really glad that you're here today because, you know, I just appreciate anybody who can make it through to the other side, live to tell about it. And, everybody has their own journey, their own story, their own thing that works for them. And, in because I worked in addiction recovery, I think I told you that, but that's just one way of doing things. That's just one way. And that, there's so many different things that you can do. And tell me about what COVID was like for you.
Actually, Julie, COVID was a blessing for me because I quit drinking a few months before COVID hit. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you couldn't go anywhere, everything public was closed. I know for millions of people, the alcohol rate like increased. People were drinking
Mm-hmm.
more because they were stuck at home. But for me, it was like the exact opposite. I did get kind of fearful of COVID in and of itself. My kids weren't going anywhere. So it was actually super helpful to me because it gave me a whole new perspective on me being at
Mm-hmm.
home. What can I do? I learned so much about myself, and I didn't have the temptation to drink. So it kind of made early sobriety really easy for me.
I'm glad, because for most people it would be harder.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. Something that you said before that I really want to touch on was like, when you get sober, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. The thing that people that you don't realize is they think that's what's going to solve everything if they just stop drinking. But that's really how they dealt with the things.
Exactly.
So now you dealt with everything sober, because that's what happens when you stop drinking, and in a confined space.
Yeah.
You literally
Yeah.
couldn't get away.
I mean, I know a lot of people like got divorced because just being with your spouse 24/7, for
Mhm.
months on end. I guess fortunately for me, I had been divorced for a year when that happened. So I didn't have to deal with that. But oh my gosh, my kids were driving me crazy. Schooling from home was driving me crazy. It was
Mhm.
stressful. But you learn how to deal with those situations because I mean, for me, alcohol wasn't an option anymore because I knew the havoc it wreaked in my life, and I wasn't going to let that happen anymore.
I love that, because a lot of people would use those things like, homeschooling and your kids driving you nuts for reasons to drink, because there's always an excuse. There's always a reason to. But is there it might be as simple as you just made the decision, but is there anything that really kept you firm in your choice not to go back to the way things were?
Yeah, it was my kids because so I had a very open relationship with my children after I got sober, and I was very straight up with them. I had a drinking problem. I'm sure you saw it. I mean, they were well aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't put like a name to it or anything like that. But I was very open with them, and I talked to them about my sobriety, what that means. I don't ever want to drink anymore because, it's not healthy for me. It's terrible for my mind, my body, my spirit, my relationships, money, like all these things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I was open with them, I felt like they were watching me. I mean, we all know that our kids are always watching us anyways, right? But even more so now. So it's funny. Sometimes if I get kind of stressed out and my kids can sense it, they're like, "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Can I get you anything?" Because they're like, they want to take care of me, and it's so sweet. And I would
Mm-hmm.
never put the responsibility on them. They're just so sweet like that. So having that built-in accountability with them, um, it just wasn't an option. I didn't want to let them down.
I love that. A lot of people say that you should get sober for yourself. And for me personally, that's all fine and dandy. But when I feel like crap about myself, the last thing I want to do is something good for myself. So I would use whatever it was around me, to keep me sober in the
Exactly.
beginning,
Yeah. Oh,
until you
yeah.
get used to it. You know what I'm saying? I understand that, doing it for somebody else and not at all for yourself is one thing, but why not use all the tools in your toolbox?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. When I first got sober, it was partly because of me, because I mean, I just felt like shit all the time. I don't know if I can say that on here. I felt horrible all the time, every day. waking up, I've got like sweaty armpits, my face is red, I'm just so tired, I can't think clearly, I'm ready to end the day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was a lot about me, but I'm telling you, a lot of it was my kids, because I've got to be a good example to them. And I was missing out on these relationships with them. I was missing out on these tiny little moments that you miss because you've been drinking too much. These little idiosyncrasies, these little things they say, you're like, oh, I wish I could remember what you used to say when you were 4 years old. So now I feel like I have that ability to share these moments with them and build memories with them. And they look up to me, they trust me. And most importantly, they are proud of me. I can't tell you how many times in the last few years my kids have just come up to me and hugged me and said, I am so proud of you, Mom. And it's just like, oh, it's like tears, you just feel so cool about that.
Plus, the amazing thing is that you showed them it's okay to ask for help. You showed them it's okay to come back from some, choices that you're not necessarily proud of or weren't the best for you. And that's okay. You can make it back.
Exactly. And I also like to use it as teaching them how to handle emotional situations in a healthy way. I mean, did your parents teach you what to do when you were sad or angry? I feel like that is a huge lesson that so many parents are missing out on. We tell our kids like, oh, don't cry, you'll be okay. Or when they get angry and they don't really know how to show their frustration or anger, like we get mad at them, like, don't throw that, don't scream at your sister. So it's like, don't do anything to show these emotions. And so I've been teaching my kids, when these emotions come up, you definitely don't want to numb out with alcohol or drugs, because it doesn't do anything. It just pushes it down and it resurfaces day after day, so it's not healthy. And so I love being able to be an example for my kids and show them, okay, this is what I do. So one of my tools is meditating. I love to meditate. I love to get in touch with myself. I've learned so much about myself, and it's relaxing. And it's just like one of the things that I utilize to, decompress at the end of the day. And it allows me to start my day in an amazing way. So, I just feel like it's kind of a lesson that a lot of parents kind of skip. Do you teach your kids how to balance the checkbook, or have you taught them how to do the dishes? But what about dealing with your emotions? I feel like when you don't do that, it can be really dangerous and can lead to some really unhealthy choices.
Oh yeah, 100%. All right. Well, you know what? Now's a good time to take our quick break. We do need to go to a commercial, so we're going to be back in just a minute. For those of you who are watching us live, once again, thank you for being here. And also, of course, everybody on demand as well. We do need to go to commercials, so we'll be right back after these messages.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name's Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness, and today's special guest is Molly Desch. Let's bring her back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So during the commercial break, I was thinking about, well, a lot of different things. But you mentioned before we went to break that you use meditation as a tool. So I'm curious because, when you first got sober, you kind of cut out all these things that you were doing, and then that left a void. So you had to fill in the void with different, behaviors and activities. What are some of the things that you did that, worked for you in the beginning or maybe even still do now?
Well, I'm going to actually be honest with you, Julie. That first year, I did not work on myself. I didn't do what people refer to as the work, which is such a, obscure term, but it really just means like figuring out who you are, figuring out what you like, what works for you.
Mhm.
So the first year, I didn't do that work. Like I said, I was stuck at home, COVID orders, couldn't go anywhere. I devoured Quit Lit. So Quit Lit is just books written about people's sobriety journeys, and a lot of it entails their darkest moments. So they're pretty riveting and interesting, and I love the vulnerability aspect of it. So I ended up relapsing 3 times that during the second year. So I went over a whole year not drinking anything. In that second year, I relapsed, and it was because these crazy emotions came up and I didn't know how to deal with them. And so every time I would think to myself, okay, what is happening here? What do I need to change? How can I make this better so when it happens again, I don't react by driving to the liquor store and getting something to drink. So I started reading. My primary care physician recommended a couple books to me. He's like the best doctor ever because he's very alternative. Like, he doesn't like to prescribe medication. So he told me to figure out how to meditate, gave me a book on that. And then there's another book about how to change the way your brain thinks. So I feel like that has been one of my main focuses in the last 2 years of my sobriety journey, is figuring out how the brain works, how you can rewire it. So meditation is one way. Affirmations. So an affirmation is just saying something like, I am strong and beautiful. It's like reaffirming and telling yourself something positive about yourself, because the way we usually talk to ourselves is so awful. We are so mean to ourselves. Oh, you're so ugly. You're so fat. You're so stupid. We say all these things, and well, your brain absorbs that and it starts believing it. So if you can talk to yourself better, then you can definitely retrain your brain to believe that too. So that was that's a big tool that I use as well. And exercise. So I'm not a runner. I don't do like strength training or anything like that. But I actually signed up for my yoga certification training because I was really into the mind, body, spirit aspect of it, and not so much as exercise. So we had like classes that you could go to. And I feel like it's so westernized. It's just like moving too fast. And I just want to slow down, pay attention to my breathing. Breathing is a huge thing too. There's so many different breathing techniques. So those are a lot of my tools that I've developed in the last couple years that they bring me joy. I mean, that's the most important thing. So what works for me may not work for somebody else. And you just have to keep trying different things until something sticks and you're like, man, that's really awesome. Or that made me feel really good. And then keep going with it.
I think that's the important part too, is to keep going with it. A lot of us start these great habits, and as soon as we start feeling better, we stop doing the things that work.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's like, I'm there. No, honey,
Right.
you're not there.
Right. Yes, totally. I tell my clients that all the time. So they'll start meditating or exercising or eating better, and they feel great. And then they stop doing it. And then they're like, I feel like crap, or I want to drink again. So that is huge. Don't stop doing the things.
Don't stop. I know. And that's the thing too. It's like when you build up these habits and, these things that bring you joy, when things are okay, it makes it easier to return to them when things aren't. It's like, who wants to, sit down and learn how to meditate when their heart is completely busted open? It's like you don't even want to be in your own skin, let alone sit there.
True. True.
I'm definitely guilty of doing that. So you never really did AA or any of that stuff?
No, I actually did. So I went to AA for about 3 months. I went every single day.
Wow.
I did not really care for it.
Mhm.
It was just a personal preference, but it was all that I really knew. It was either AA or rehab, and I went to an outpatient rehab facility. I visited it, got the tour and everything, and was like, nope, that's not for me. So I was like, I guess I'm going to go to AA because that was like really all I ever knew.
Yeah, and that's why I really like you because, you tried it and it wasn't for you. Not saying it doesn't work, but just saying that it's not for everybody. It wasn't for me either. So I can appreciate that. But it's like there's only two options really for people who admit they have a drinking problem that are common anyway,
Yeah,
common
exactly.
knowledge. Rehab and AA, and that's about it. It's like
Right.
there's got to be something else, and there is. So that's why I
Exactly.
wanted.
There is.
I promise. So I'm gonna put up your website here. I would love for you to explain how you help people.
First of all, I work with women only, but I do know some men coaches, if there's any men that are watching that are interested. So I help women discover themselves on their sobriety journey because that was a huge part that I missed out on the first year of my sobriety journey. And I know it would have prevented me from relapsing if I would have taken the time and gotten to know myself and built some healthy habits. So the first thing I do when I start working with my clients is the two of us, we get to know who she is at the most intimate and deep level. And I use all sorts of techniques and strategies to do that. And then we start building our toolbox. And I think you mentioned this before, a toolbox. So a sober toolbox is just anything you use that helps you keep sober, whether it's reading, exercise, healthy foods, staying away from bars. Like there's so many different things that you can add to your toolbox. So making sure that it's what makes sense for them. So it's based on their personality, their life values. We even do some astrology because I feel like that's really insightful as well. And we just go on this journey together, and it's the most incredible and rewarding and serendipitous event that could ever happen to these women. I mean, they just feel so much happier. Like the physical benefits just don't even compare to their mental well-being. I mean, the physical benefits, you start feeling them right away. But the mental benefits, they take time. And that's my job, is to make them feel amazing. And that's what I love to do. I just want to make them feel amazing and worth it. And I tell them, I'm like, girl, you are worth it. You are so beautiful. You have a beautiful soul. Quit this drinking and let's rock your world. And that's just like my most passionate favorite thing. So I am a life coach. I help women get sober. And so that's like an alternative to AA or rehab. There's several of us out there.
Well, you know what I love too is actually my best friend Michelle and I were talking the other day because we met working at a rehab, and she and I both have done our own things or whatever. But she and I were talking the other day, and we were saying about how rehab's great, but it tears you down. It doesn't build you back up again. I mean, there's only X amount, one thing can do. And it takes a while. And, one size doesn't fit all, but it's like nobody really teaches you how to be sober, and how to live without drinking. It's like, like I said before, now all of a sudden you have to deal with all the things you were avoiding, but sober. It's like, this is why I was drinking in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, one of my clients the other day was telling me, because she went to rehab, and her and I laid down for a meditation together. And she was just like, they don't do this stuff with you at rehab. She's like, this is so amazing. I feel so good. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, what are they doing at rehab? That's, it's supposed to be rehabilitating you, which I feel
Yeah.
like is like building this new persona, who you are.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of that can be missed in traditional therapy as well as rehab.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like what you focus on expands, one of the universal laws. So who do you want to be as opposed to who are you trying to avoid being? That's
Yeah.
the thing that I didn't like personally about AA. It was like I'm trying to avoid being like, who I was. Why am I still talking about it all the time?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just like
I'm
war story over and over again.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
And, the one thing though, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, just in case people are watching, the thing I did sometimes, I mean, everybody's experience is different, but I made some really, people were there for me in AA that were perfect strangers when I really had nobody. So, don't be afraid to try it. Just try everything. It's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to look a certain way, which, like I said, that's one of the main reasons I wanted you on the show, because you didn't do things in like the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And yet here you are helping other people do what you did quicker and with more grace. So, um, I want to touch on the idea too of relapse, because I think there's a lot of people who don't have drinking problems, or even people that do, don't really understand that it's pretty common. It doesn't have to mean anything unless you make it mean something.
Yeah. I mean,
And
the way I see it is it's a learning opportunity.
there you go.
So you can feel like shit the next day and beat yourself up over it, or you can figure out what you need to change and how you can reframe your program to make it not happen again.
I like that. And I like the idea of program too, because, you got to have something to do, because if, like your first year, you were taking care of everything. So you were filling the time, but you weren't really taking care of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That avoidance, I mean, you can't avoid it forever.
Yeah.
Have
When
you
you're
noticed?
drinking, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you're drinking, you're not taking care of yourself. And
Great.
when you have this pattern, this habitual pattern, week after week, month after month, year after year, you just like forget that you got to take care of yourself. I mean, you're barely taking care of your family, your bills, your chores, your kids. You don't have time to take care of yourself now because you're sitting there from like 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock drinking wine all night or whatever it is. I mean, so you have to relearn how to take care of yourself. I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, from the time I was probably 16 till my late 30s, I was drinking very heavily, and I didn't really learn how to be an adult, So I also had to relearn that. Um, they say, there's no manual for being a parent, but it's like there's no manual for being an adult either. You just got to like figure this stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I mean, maybe now things are a little bit different, but definitely when I was a kid, it was when you cried, suck it up. You're too sensitive.
Rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, like you said, we were never allowed to show quote unquote negative emotions. Heaven forbid, we
Right.
should feel bad about anything.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it would be nice to learn those things, and nobody really teaches you, but like you're changing the paradigm. You're the one that's saying, okay. And I love that you're so honest with your kids, because they know more than you think they do, and they see more than you know that they do. So it's kind of like you've acknowledged that, and by allowing them in, they feel a part of your journey, and like
Exactly.
anything's possible, instead of like, ooh, this is the bad thing.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I like what you said about changing the paradigm.
Mhm.
I am a firm believer that there is a bunch of generational trauma in my family, and showing emotions was never acceptable. for both sides of my family, my mom's side
Mhm.
and my dad's side. And that stuff just gets passed on and passed on. And I am just done with it. It is okay to show emotions. And I'm not saying my kids are big crybabies or anything like that. But I want them to be able to come to me when they're upset and talk to me about things. I mean, we sit down and we discuss what's going on at school, or my 12-year-old, he's having some hormone things going on right now and he doesn't understand it. He's like, I don't know why I feel the way I do. And I love that he can come to me and talk to me about these things. So I am done with these generational, don't, like you said, just suck it up and don't show emotion thing.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about you changing things, because gosh, life would have been so much. I'm not saying that my parents weren't there for me. They did the best that they could, but it was different. They
Yeah.
only knew what they knew. And now that we know better, we can do better. And like you said, it's not like your kids are crybabies, but at least they can if they need to,
Exactly. Yeah. My parents were the same way, but like you said, it's what they were passed on and they didn't know any better. And so I don't know. I feel like I was blessed to be able to know the difference and spot that and then make a conscious decision to change it.
Exactly. So there's something that I was sharing the other day with somebody, and I think it was on the show. But anyway, it was that one of my tells, like, because when I first got sober, I was so out of touch with my own thoughts, feelings, emotions, what I liked, what I didn't like. I mean, I was a mystery to me. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And one of my tells that something was amiss, it's time for me to slow my roll and take a look at, pay better attention, something's off, is if there was dishes in my sink. That was how I knew. Something
Oh my
up
gosh, that's
here,
so good.
something up here wasn't quite right. And so I'm curious, what are some things that you see people, not necessarily, I mean, you could share your own, but everybody has little things. Have you noticed a pattern with, people and like their tells?
Yeah. People get quiet. So if you reach out to them, I mean, there's clients that, I haven't talked to or interacted with in a few months, and I'll reach out to them and I don't hear back for a while. Then they finally reach out and they're like, oh, I had a drink. And it's like, I knew it because you were quiet. It was like you were kind of like ashamed or something, that shame
Mhm.
just kind of like really eat at you. Um, Overly busy. I mean, just kind of going back to their old patterns. So
Mhm.
working all the time, or I've got one gal, she's in school and works and not taking the time to do the things, do those habits. They drop the habits. Oh, I
Yeah.
haven't been to the gym in like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, you better get back. Things are going to get bad if you don't.
Yeah, it's good for your body and your mind to work out. And if you don't like the gym, figure something else out, like you and
Yeah,
yoga.
right.
It doesn't have to look the North American way. And I'm telling you, it's a North American thing, because you go to Europe, it's not like it there. It's
Yeah.
not as common. But yeah, no, I like those are some really good ones, because those are signs for other people too, like family members and friends to pay attention to with their loved ones.
I feel like the withdrawing part is a big one
Yeah.
because I mean, you want to hide. You don't want people to smell your breath. You don't want them to see that you're drinking. I mean, that was a big one for me too. I mean, I would turn down events where it was like, well, I know I'm probably not going to be able to drink there, and I want to be able to get my drink on, so I'm not going to go. And so, yeah, people that are withdrawing, I feel like that's a really telltale sign. Or on the opposite, people that are just spending more time than usual in the office, and it's like
Mhm.
10 o'clock at night. Like, are you really at the office, or did you stop off at the bar maybe? Just different patterns than what you're used to seeing. I feel like could be any sort of sign.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. All right, it is time for our second set of commercials, so we'll be back in just a minute. And as I mentioned, it's time for those commercials. And happy Easter Monday. I guess so that we can have a federal holiday. Maybe that's why we celebrate 2 days in a row, even though it's Sunday. I'm not sure, but anyway, we got to go to commercial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring our guest Molly back. All right, welcome. So during the commercial break, I always think about all the different ways we can take the conversation because, there's a plethora of different things we can talk about. But one of the things that, I'd love to, really kind of delve into is the possibility of, because you mentioned, working late, but not actually working late. But what happens, it's still avoidance behavior when you all of a sudden are working all these hours or all of a sudden watching all this TV or playing these video games and all these other things. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about, replacing one avoidance behavior with another.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So this is a great question. I feel like social media is one of them that you may not have listed.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to replace a habit with something healthy, you can absolutely end up in this pit of these unhealthy ones. So you think like you're doing a good thing. Well, at least I'm not drinking anymore, or at least I'm not, X, Y, or Z. I'm not gambling or whatever the addiction is. So you try and like trick your mind into thinking like, well, I'm actually doing a good thing. I mean, I did that to myself. So the first, when I quit drinking, so when I was drinking, I was a salt snacker, loved salty foods. And then as soon as I quit drinking, it was like, I needed sweets all the time. And I didn't know where it came from. And people were like, oh, well, it's just because there's so much sugar and alcohol. So your body is just like used to it. So I tell myself, well, at least I'm not drinking. I can have this entire sleeve of Oreo cookies because it's not a 12-pack of beer or whatever. And we do that with like social media. You can sit there and it's like you're definitely avoiding something. And so you can ask yourself, okay, what should I be doing at this point in time? Like, was I supposed to be making dinner? Was I supposed to be doing this or that? Working is an avoidance. Maybe there's something going on at home. Maybe you and your spouse are having problems and you just don't want to deal with it. So you stay at work late until your spouse is asleep. I mean, there's so many ways that we end up replacing, or not really replacing, but avoiding these sticky situations, these uncomfortable situations that we don't want to face, that we don't want to talk about, with another behavior. And for me, it was drinking. I mean, I was married for 10 years, and it was probably 10 years too many. And I didn't know what to do with that, So I drank a lot. I didn't like being at home with him. I didn't like just being married. I'm very much of a free spirit type person, so it was very much against who I am innately. Again, something else that you learn after you get sober: who the heck am I? What kind of person am I? So you begin to kind of notice these patterns when your behavior is changing. You're kind of doing some erratic things that you weren't really used to. Well, why am I working so much? Why am I drinking so much? Why am I on Facebook or Instagram all the time? What am I avoiding? I feel like that's a really hard question to answer. Not hard in the sense that you can't find the answer, but sometimes you don't want to find the answer because you don't with it.
Well, that and the other thing too, I noticed, my sort of addictive behavior popping out in other ways, like, I'll have a cup of coffee and it feels good, so I might as well have 10 more. Because 10 more will be at least 10 times as good.
Yeah, right.
That's another one that I've noticed with myself. I'm like, okay, slow your roll.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of funny how things work like that. I don't know. But yeah, I just feel like, it is a matter of learning these things, that work for you, so that, that you can sit there and be uncomfortable, because not everything can be solved. It's not, a sitcom where in 30 minutes everything is resolved and everything goes back to normal. It's life. And if you can sit in that uncomfortability, then it makes things a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, you mentioned that, you found out that you were a free spirit. What are some other things that you discovered about yourself?
So like I mentioned before, I do a natal reading, so astrology, with all of my clients. And I had my very first reading with one of my friends probably a year and a half ago. And it really opened up my eyes to who I am as a person. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, astrology, like that's so kooky. Like, how in the heck can the moon and the stars and the planets have so much control over who you are? And I was the same way. I was like, that's so weird. Like, I don't believe it. And the more I dove into it and the more readings I sat in on and had, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like, it's so right on. And so I am a Cancer and I have a Pisces moon. So that means I am like a homebody that's very emotional, and it like makes sense, So I was spending all this time at happy hours and like trying to be social. Well, that was like so uncomfortable for me. So that's why I would drink so much, because I just innately was not this super social, outgoing person. And I'm emotional. So I take on a lot of other people's emotions. Somebody can walk in the room and they're frustrated, they're annoyed, they're angry, and I just feel it. And I'm like, immediately, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong? Can I help you? And so when I'm experiencing that as well, I look back and I'm like, well, that makes so much sense. I was miserable all these years, or I was sad, or I was depressed, or angry, or frustrated. It's no wonder I drink so much. So that was definitely something that I discovered about myself. The astrology piece I felt was really just so interesting and so cool.
How did you get into that though?
So one of my friends, she was teaching at this women's conference, and she invited me because I wanted to go and support her. And another woman that was teaching is this astrologer that I'm now friends with. And so she talked about the natal chart and this and that. And I was like, this is interesting. So I met with her afterwards and just asked her if she'd give me a reading. And she did. And I was just completely blown away.
No, I love that. Every time somebody says something like that, I don't know a lot about astrology, although I've had quite a few astrologers on the show in the not so recent past. Anyway, the thing that is funny to me is people are like, oh, how can the planets, affect you? I'm like, the moon moves the ocean.
I know.
We're mostly made of water. What do you mean?
Yes.
Hello?
Right. Exactly. And speaking of the moon, I always get a little unstable. I feel like unstable may be a little dramatic, but my mood swings are crazy during the full moon. And so now that I'm aware of that, I can kind of plan, like, do I want to be around people during the full moon? Probably not. So I make sure I'm like, okay, next Thursday is going to be the full moon. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be at home, probably take a bath, take care of myself, things like that. So I feel like that level of awareness is really important too, because in sobriety, these things just come out of nowhere. And when you're not prepared and you don't have these healthy habits established, you could relapse or be triggered super easily.
Yeah. You have a podcast, right? I'd love for you to talk about that.
I do. Yeah, it's called This Is Sober. I started it earlier this year. I just wanted to interview other people in their sobriety journey, some healthcare professionals, anybody that's got kind of like some interesting and unique way that can help people in their sobriety journey. And I share a lot of my story in it as well. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing it.
I love that. And how can people catch it?
Yeah, it's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. I mean, anywhere that you can find a podcast, it's on there.
That's awesome. I love that. I love, I like it because, okay, so there's this thing. I have this friend and I adore her, but she used to work at a strip club for most of her life. I mean, probably like 40 years she worked at a strip club. And she thinks that all men are cheaters and blah, 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 blah. And it took me a minute to figure this out. But she's like, even all the good ones, they all say that they're, not, they love their wife, blah, blah, blah. But, get a couple drinks in them and they turn into, cheaters and all this. And then it dawned on me and I was like, yeah, but they're also at a strip club. Not all men go to,
Exactly.
That's not necessary. That's like going to a bar being shocked that people are drinking,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you're not going to meet your future husband at a bar. It's like, well, if you don't want to, then don't go to the bar.
Exactly. So it's kind of, that's how I feel about, this like sober thing. It's like making other people more accessible, people like you more accessible to the mainstream so that people know there's more than one way besides rehab and AA.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there that got sober without doing either of those things, but nobody knows about them because there's like no, I don't know, culture around that. There's whole cultures around rehab and, AA.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's just a terrible stigma in general. People still use the term alcoholism, which isn't even medically recognized, or it's not in the mental health professional anymore. But you're just seen as somebody that's like a complete loser. Like you can't get your life together. Why can't you just quit? But there really is a pretty big sober community. You can find them online. There's a lot of people that I follow on Instagram, and it's really inspiring to hear other people's stories and be vulnerable with other people, as a mom to a mom or woman to a woman, when you're able to share something and somebody's like, oh my gosh, me too. Then it just like opens the door for them to also feel connected and like it's safe for them to talk about it too. I just feel like people are just not having the conversations like they should be having them. And I'm not afraid to have the conversation. I've kind of like told my story all over the place. So I'm an open book and there's no shame or judgment here.
Well, it makes it okay for other people to share theirs. So, I appreciate that because it's not always the easiest thing. And there's always going to be people who have a comment or a thought about it and negative things to say. But my favorite quote ever is from Epictetus. And he says that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. And the point is that not everybody's going to understand your journey, but then people ask you how you did it. So
yeah, exactly.
Like, I want what she has.
Yeah, for sure. But
I don't want to do the work is usually what it is.
Yeah, just give me this magic pill. It doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left. So I'm just curious if there's anything else you'd love to share with the audience, maybe a new thought or even reiterate something that you'd love, people to remember.
Oh my goodness. Like I said, there is actually a pretty big sober community out there. So if you follow me on Instagram, you can go see all the people that I follow. They always have like all sorts of fun and interesting memes. They've got their own websites. I mean, there's just like this rabbit hole that you can go down. So I feel like that's a really great place to start. And my website too, I've got some blog posts, some just all sorts of good stuff out there. Just be curious. And so there is actually a term called sober curious. So you can be sober curious. And that's one of my favorite things about it is, there's such a supportive community when you do decide that this is something that you're interested in looking into. Don't worry. You don't have to commit right away, but get curious about it. Start down the rabbit hole and see where you end up.
I like that. And I like the idea of just opening up because you can't find your people if you aren't looking,
Right.
And you mentioned some books or some literature that you were reading, devouring before, and I'd love for you to mention that again.
Yeah. So one of my favorites is Laura McKowen. She just came out with her second book. So her first one is We Are the Luckiest, and the second is Push Off From Here. Both read them in like 2 days. They're just so amazing. There's another one that's more based on like science, what alcohol does to your brain and your body. It's called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And then Ruby Warrington wrote the book called Sober Curious. So if you're interested in sober curiosity, that's a really good one too.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely.
I've been looking forward to this, and I'm so glad you were here and able to share your story with us.
Yes. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
And that is all the time that we have for today. We will see you guys again on Thursday. That's right. It's Monday. I always forget. Anyway, have a good week, everyone.